today. UFC 326 is in the books, and the question that we have to ask ourselves, did we see Charles Olivera level up? Did he take it to a new level? Did he hit Super Saiyan? Or did he single-handedly just ruin the BMF championship? And what about Freedom 250? What was your reaction when you saw the fights that have been released so far for that card? And then, how about Jon Jones, Dana White, Tom Aspinall, and Ariel Helwani? All intertwined in some strange, weird smorgasbord of MMA folk. I don't know. But we're going to get off into it. All of this and more on today's episode of Matter of Fact MMA. What's up? What's happening? Let's go. What's up, guys? We right back at it. We right back with it. It's your boy, Matt. And we are here to talk about UFC 326. A couple of highlights. A few little lowlights. We are here to talk about, not going to go over the card, but just initial reactions to UFC Freedom 250, formerly known as the UFC White House card. That I know that was never the official title, but Freedom 250 just sounds generic, while, I don't know. It just sounds generic, cheaply made, cheaply put together, cheaply assembled. You know what I'm saying? Freedom 250 reminds me of Budweiser beer. You know what I mean? What are we doing here? You know what I'm saying? If you're drinking a Budweiser, what are you doing with your life if you're calling yourself a certified real beer drinker? Even an alcohol drinker. Why are you drinking Budweiser? You couldn't find nothing else other than that. But that's what Freedom 250 sounds like to me, and that ain't good. And then what about Jon Jones and everything that has been swirling around him since Saturday night? Let's get off into it. Let's start off first with UFC 326. It went down at the T-Mobile Arena, in which in the main event, Charles Olivera pitches a 5-round shutout, a 5-round drumming. I mean, the man went out there for 5 rounds and imposed his will on a man. Had these two men met in a dark alley or on a city street, Charles Olivera would have... And Max Holloway is floating in the sky. He's a new member of the Wind and Ghosts community. Wind chimes going in the background. Ding, 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 ding. Pour one out for Max Holloway. Because that's what we saw on Saturday night. As Charles Olivera goes out there in a BMF title fight and left no space between these two men, kept it on the ground the entire fight, grappled him, wrestled him, did multiple submission attempts, almost finished him in those submission attempts, and it goes to the 5-round decision, and it was well deserved. Charles Olivera is your winner. Now, off the tippy top, let's talk about the BMF championship. Was this the BMF championship fight that we wanted to see? You know, and while I'm thinking about it, please like, subscribe, comment, let me know. Don't miss the point of this channel. It's called Matter of Fact. That means my opinion is Matt, or is it your opinion, which is your fact? So let me know in the comments. Do you agree or do you disagree? Here's the thing. When you think of a BMF title fight, you know, you think of your Justin Gaethjes, your Dustin Poirier, you think of Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz, the originators of it. Even that fight wasn't the biggest scrap, but we were robbed of a good ending, I believe, because the doctor took it away due to the cuts and things on Nate Diaz's face. You think about Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. You think of that being one of the greatest UFC fights of all time. You think about the last 10 seconds of that fight being possibly the greatest last 10 seconds of any UFC fight in history. Was it action like all of that? No. It was not that type of action. And I really think that depends on you as the fan if this was a BMF championship title fight. Because what Charles Olivera did is possibly leveled up. Charles Olivera went in there. He's always been a good grappler. He's always been a submission artist. One of the best submission artists in the entire UFC. He always could crack on the feet. Michael Chandler told Joe Rogan that the punches that he sustained to the face from Charles Olivera made him feel like he had cotton in his mouth. Like his mouth felt dry and he felt like almost a ringing or a burning sensation in his jaws, bro. Like, how hard do you gotta punch to make somebody feel that? You know what I'm saying? So we always knew that this man could crack. But what I believe he added on extra is he took out the bravado, the pride of staying on the feet, of striking. Now, granted, we've seen him grapple a lot and grapple a lot in many fights. He grappled most of the fight against Mateus Gamrot, but it wasn't like this. There were moments where he would still stand and try to crack Mateus. Bro, this is different. We saw Charles Olivera figure out a game in which he recklessly crashes forward, but now he's added on takedowns. And he's always had takedowns, but these were a little bit different. Trust me, if you look at these, it's not the same as you've seen in previous parts of his career, because a lot of the time Charles Olivera would keep the fight standing. And he might get cracked, he might fall to the ground, and then his opponent would follow him. And then he'd start hitting the reversals or start playing off of his back. Or he'd be able to crash in somewhat, get close enough to his opponent to grapple, have him up against a fence, start to do trips, things like that, and get him to the ground. But in this, we saw him crashing forward toward Max Holloway because he wasn't worried about a takedown. He wasn't worried about whatever was going to come back after him, because if he gets hit and falls, that's what he wants anyway, unless he's getting hit by Ilia Topuria. But that's what he wants, so he can try to bait the person into coming down there and grappling him, right? If he crashes forward and doesn't get the takedown, and the way he was crashing, by the time he's in around your waist level, his arms and his hands are already locked behind your knees and you're getting scooped. You know what I'm saying? But if for some reason he gets in close and you got the underhooks in and he can't do that, you got the underhooks in and he's already ready for the grappling. Very interesting, because he took away that bravado of striking. He wasn't worried about striking. He didn't care. You want me to strike? You can't be serious. You know what I'm saying? It's how you looked at everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Charles, we was wondering, could you strike in the BMF title fight? Nah, I ain't gonna be able to strike, bro. I'm just gonna get you down to the ground. There's gonna be no daylight between the two of us, and I'm gonna wrestle you. And I'm going to grapple you, and I'm going to try to submit you. And I'm going to keep you on the ground. I'm going to take your will. I'm going to impose myself on you. You won't be able to do anything. And frankly, if you look at it from that perspective, that's pretty BMF. That's pretty BMF. Now, he's not trying to knock the guy out. He's not striking a ton on the ground to knock the guy out. He attempted submissions. So you take the, you take the breath from someone. It do the same thing as cutting out their lights. You know what I'm saying? I'm not here to make the point that this was a great BMF title fight, because if you ask me personally, I sit there and watched it. And that first round, you was kind of on edge because you didn't really know what was going to happen. The second round, when you saw him take Max down again, you knew what was going to happen. So, this was not an exciting BMF title fight to me. This, personally, it did not qualify as what we know as the standard BMF title fight. It just didn't have that action level. But if you're going to ask me if Charles Olivera is a BMF, I'm going to have to tell you right to your face. He's a BMF. Because who have you ever seen do that to Max Holloway? Ilia just stopped him. You know what I'm saying? Volk just beat him in a 5-round decision. But it wasn't that level of domination. It was domination. But this was a different type of domination. This is at 155, where I made the whole point that this is where Max belongs. So, it's what we saw. That's what went down. That was the BMF title fight. We will see where they go from there. But one might think, if it's coming down to 155 pounds, you might not ever see another BMF title fight. The UFC might have to pivot, like they moved it from 170 from Jorge and Nate Diaz. They might have to move it to another division. Because if this is how Charles Olivera intends to fight from now on, I don't think they want to take that chance of signing another BMF. Let's move on. Let's talk about, co-main event. Caio Borralho goes out there, defeats Rener de Ridder. This was a good fight. It had moments. It kind of started to die down at the end and made me kind of wonder if Borralho, I haven't really seen the post-fight footage or anything like that, post-fight interviews. I haven't heard anybody talking about this a couple of days later. I don't know if he had broke his hand or what was going on, but he really quit throwing that right hand and he would kind of swing it almost like a club more toward the end of the third round. I don't really know what was up with that. I don't know if that kind of played into the fact that he wasn't doing the same level of action that he was in the first and second round, even though Renner started to come on strong in the second. But man, interesting fight. I think Rener de Ridder should go up to 205 pounds and fight in that division. And Borralho's going to have to get another fight. I'm not sure who they're going to be able to put him in there with, but he's clearly not going to be next for Hamzat. So I don't really know what's going to happen there, but he definitely needs another fight. He called for Dricus du Plessis. I think that would be an outstanding matchup. Would love to see that. I think there'd be a lot of action in that fight. Raul Rosas Jr. goes out there and defeats Rob Font. Pretty boring fight. Unanimous decision. Performance of the night. Drew Dober goes out there and sends my guy MJ, Michael Johnson, to the land of wind and ghosts. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully, I don't know. I think the wake is going to be this Thursday. I think the funeral is going to be this Friday. But shout out to Michael Johnson. Not really. But these are just jokes. But he made that man lay flat. That man started testifying on the ground. Nevertheless, shout out to Drew Dober. How about Gregory Rodriguez? RoboCop goes in there where Bruno Ferreira gets the job done. Performance of the night bonus for him as well as Drew Dober. As he goes out there and knocks out Bruno in the first round, gets revenge for their first matchup in which Bruno won. Then we had Cody Garbrandt go out there with Xiao Long. And this was the weirdest fight because Cody Garbrandt was losing all rounds of this fight. But he kept getting low blowed by his opponent over and over and over again to the point that Herb Dean had to pull the interpreter into the octagon and let him know, tell this fool to quit kicking him in and punch him in the ding ding. You know what I'm saying? It got that bad. And then we had a moment where I thought if he pulls this off, Cody Garbrandt could single-handedly revive and save his career, because the final low blow, Cody Garbrandt gets up off the ground after being there for a long time. He makes this weird face. He looks charged. The fans are cheering him on. He starts yelling. He starts hyping himself up like he's about to really throw down, like we're going to see that vintage Cody Garbrandt. The referee Herb Dean says they can fight again. Man, he charges across the octagon while yelling. Almost headbutts his opponent. Almost headbutts Long. And then that quickly got calmed down when Long started letting him hands go on him and started touting him on. And Cody Garbrandt quietly shut up because he remembered that Herb Dean had taken away 2 points. Not one, but 2. Dose took away 2 points from Long for all of the fouls and low blows. So then Cody just settled in, did not win any rounds of that fight in my opinion, even though I think the judges gave him one, and he wins. So he could have revived his card. He could have took it back to the days. We were like, who is this animal named Cody Garbrandt who just defeated Dominic Cruz? Who is this mythical man? Well, we know who he is. He's Cody Garbrandt because he didn't revive any of that. So that was that, man. My only other takeaway from this card, Dante Johnson needs a lot of work. Because he should have put Cody Brundage away, and he didn't. He needs a lot of work, really needs to work on his stand-up. That's no disrespect to him. I know he beat me up, I'm just saying. Anyway, let's move on. How about initial feeling about the White House card known as Freedom 250? Where at the tippy top of that card, we have Ilia Topuria defending the lightweight championship against Justin Gaethje. We also have the co-main event, Alex Pereira, who recently vacated the light heavyweight championship, stepping in the octagon with Cyril Gane for the interim heavyweight title until Tom returns and is able to fight later this year. You know, man, I'm going to be honest. I was like so with this Freedom 250 card. At least on the fights that have been released thus far. We got Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje, lightweight championship. Pereira versus Gane, interim heavyweight. Sean O'Malley versus Ayman Zahabi. What are we doing here? Ayman Zahabi made it to the White House card. What are we doing here? Mauricio Hufi stepping in the octagon with Michael Chandler. You knew they was going to throw Chandler on this card. That's about as close as Chandler's ever going to get to fighting Conor. So that's why I think they did that. Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dawkins. What are we doing there? No doubt they're going to do a video package about Kyle Dawkins being a former law enforcement person and all this. But it still ain't going to sell and it still ain't going to work. I would die laughing if he beat Bo Nickel. And then also on the main card, we have Diego Lopez versus Steven Garcia. Good to see Diego Lopez. Steven Garcia is definitely that dude and not to be slept on. Weird matchup for the White House card, but I do think it will be fun. But really, man, when I saw the card, I didn't completely like throw up and like it made me regurgitate or get sick. But at the same time, it wasn't hitting. It just wasn't hitting. So I wasn't really blown. My socks was not blown off whatsoever, I'll tell you that. So it was like, I don't know. I didn't really have too much to say about it. Now in the last few days, there's going to be quite a bit to discuss about this card. And I'm going to have another video about this in a day or two that I'll be releasing on my channel about the actual fights and the card itself. But my initial take of it that night, there was no real pageantry. All we had was John Anik say, after this fight, we're going to be going over the White House card. We're going to be revealing it. And I'm like, okay, there wasn't like a real legit video package, nothing like that. So wasn't a lot of pageantry to it, but it is what it is. And how about after the White House card, Dana White at the post-fight press conference, I'm sorry, I said after the White House card, I mean after UFC 326, he's at the post-fight press conference, and this is going to enter into my next topic, and they're asking him about Jon Jones, and they had heard, it was a video that come out there with Dana and Nina Drama, where Dana White told her at the last minute, I think it was like Friday night, that one of the big fights for the UFC White House card just fell out. A lot of speculation on if Jon Jones was involved in that. And I don't know if it's necessarily been put out there that it was his fight. But apparently, from what's being discussed from Ariel Helwani and Jon Jones, and even Tom Aspinall has weighed in on it, Jon Jones is actually saying he's extremely angry with the UFC, and he is saying that the UFC tried to lowball him. They didn't want to pay him a ton of money to go in there and fight Alex Pereira at the White House card. Very interesting because he's coming off of a fight in which they were willing to offer him roughly around $30 million to step in the octagon with Tom Aspinall. But then for the Pereira fight, they're not willing to give him that much. They're kind of talking about Conor Benn numbers around 15 million, which is still a ton of money, but 15 million shorter of what you previously offered the man. Ariel Helwani seems to be somewhat confirming this for all of his sources and what he knows. Tom Aspinall says he believes the UFC actually did Jon Jones wrong. Even Tom Aspinall, Tom, eye patch, coming out here trying to come to the aid of Jon Jones. Dana White says Jon Jones has an arthritic hip and he's in the later stages of his life and he will never fight in the UFC again. However, Jon basically said, if that's what you believe, and if you're telling me that Dana said there was never a time Jon was going to be on the card. He was never going to put Jon on the White House card. Jon says they were in late night. Now, I'm not saying it was the Friday night fight, but they were in late night. They were in a lot of negotiations. And that's where they lowballed him. So Jon is saying, if I'm of no use to you or your company and you don't like me, release me from my contract and let me go out here elsewhere with my arthritic hips. You know what I'm saying? Let me put these hips to use elsewhere in the sport. We know the UFC will never do that because you'd see Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou on the Netflix card along with Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano. So I don't know really who's right, who's wrong. This is what I would say. This is the last thing I'll say about this video. Be sure to tap into my next video, which, like I said, I'm going to be going over the UFC White House card, and we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into this Jon Jones fiasco, because more news comes out about it every day. But this is what I would say, as a fan of Jon Jones the fighter, not the man, who has this man on my wall. Is all of this really so shocking? Let's be real, man. Jon Jones has played a lot of games with the UFC in his career. From the time they had to move an entire card to California because of picograms. From way back in the day when he didn't want to fight Chael Sonnen on short notice and force the UFC to cancel a card. To the multiple run-ins with the law. To them trying to put him in the Hall of Fame and him getting arrested that same night. Or we also had the entire fiasco with him stepping in the octagon with Stipe Miocic, which is what originally ruined the heavyweight division and hijacked it for about 2 years, right? Or you have the entire fiasco with trying to get the man to fight Tom Aspinall. And the negotiations were up, down. He didn't want to fight Tom. He didn't want to give him the chance. Then he did. Then he didn't care about Tom. Then he wanted more money to fight him. Then they make him the offer that he wanted or come close to it, and he decides he's going to retire from the sport and not go through with the fight. Right? And then Dana White. What are we expecting from Dana White? Of course Dana White lies. Of course Dana White lies about his negotiations with fighters. Do you think he's ever going to walk in front of you and tell you the real deal negotiations that he has with his fighters? None of them do. His arch enemy, Eddie Hearn, doesn't. And we're going to get off into Eddie Hearn and Tom Aspinall in the next video as well. His arch enemy, Eddie Hearn, doesn't. None of them do. Turki Al-Rashid is not going to go out there and tell you about his negotiations with his fighters. So, of course, you're dealing with two liars, bro. So what do you expect the fallout to be between Jon Jones and Dana White? Both of them lie. And both parties, while I don't know how bad Dana White has done Jon Jones in his career, but we know Jon Jones has done the UFC bad. And as a Jon Jones fan, it kind of seems like to me that Jon Jones came a knocking this time, wanting his fight with Pereira in the White House, and they just were not willing to deliver that. And Dana White's not going to really tell you what happened between the two parties, but to me it's not really that shocking whatsoever that both parties would have these issues and this type of fallout. So we'll see where this goes, how this plays out. Like I said, there's more developing about the story every single day. Like I said, I'm going to be dropping another video in a day or two, so be on the lookout for that, where we're going to talk about the fights that are right now released for the Freedom 250 card. We're going to talk about the rumored fights that the UFC couldn't make. We're going to talk about John Jones. We're going to talk about Dana White. We're going to talk about Tom Aspinall. And we're going to include Eddie Hearn. So this should be very interesting. We'll see how this goes. I don't know, man. Weird things going on right now in the MMA world. We got Ronda Rousey still out here clowning the White House card. I mean, it's some wild stuff going on right now. So we'll see how it all plays out, man. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. And once again, I do want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode of Matter of Fact MMA. And I'll check you next time. Peace.